Hi everyone, thanks for watching. You can support our work on our website ageoftruth.tv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, BitChute and Brighteon. And remember to hit the bell for notifications. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook. To be sure not to miss any of our shows, you can sign up for our newsletter on our website ageoftruth.tv.
Hello and welcome to this live presentation of Age of Truth TV, the Age of Truth and Awareness Earth Change and the Old World Paradigm. I'm Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark, and our guest presenter today is an enlightened and knowledgeable gentleman from the Netherlands. He's a historian, author, and researcher of ancient civilizations, mythology, mysticism, spirituality, numerology, and the occult. He's also a color expert, truth speaker, and a dot connector. Mark STOLK. Hi everyone, we are live right now. I just switched seats here and we had some technical difficulties. I'm very sorry about that. And Lauke here, say hi to people.
Hello everyone.
We are live with a fantastic guest tonight, Mark STOLK. He's from the Netherlands and I just did the presentation. And we would like to hear what you have to say as well. So for once, I will be joining you in the chat tonight so that you can send me questions for Mark, because he's going to do a really fascinating and mind-blowing presentation, a live presentation here today. So while if you want to ask him some questions, when he's done with the presentation, we'll take like 20 or 25 minutes for some of the questions that Lauke and I will select, and then we will take them live at the end. So this is going to be quite an exciting day, because I have given up my seat today for Mark STOLK, and we are very excited to present him here on the channel, and I hope you will receive him well. So without further ado, let's go to Mark STOLK. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Lucas, and also hello, Lauke. And as you heard, we've been working under great pressure here, and I was impressed by these two guys, making it possible to still have this transmission. Well, I've been asked to do a presentation about many things, and one is about bringing in a way a message of hope in these sometimes what seems to be darkening times. How can we better get ready for the future? How can we better stay intact in these turbulent and also challenging times? And in order to do so, I want to come into a not easy journey, because we need to go back into not just history, we need to go back into understanding solar mechanics, natural laws, have a dive into ancient Egypt, before the flood, after the flood. We need to get into what's happening at these times, and also we need to somehow end up with a message of hope about these times and what is actually possible. So, I think I need to start, and the first thing I actually want to do is, it sounds a bit odd, but to greet my beloved wife and my daughter Sophie, who are watching at the moment, and all those other people I do know. And I want to also make a great thank you to all the teachers and ushers that have helped me through my life to get to this place. But to start with the winter solstice. Now, the winter solstice it's always a time of new force coming into our planet. And if you go back into a time where our planet's atmosphere was less polluted by all kinds of radiation from computers, TV, 5G, 4G, 3G, the hot thoughts of people, the stress of a Monday morning, devices like refrigerators, mobile telephones. The planet was more clean electrically, and many people, especially when you go back in time, were able to see what happened at this time of the winter solstice. And one of the things which I experienced myself, that if you go around this time, it is lasting to around the 3rd of January, you can go in the middle of the night to the forest, and then if you train your eyes not to look at things, but have a kind of wide look, you might be, if you're in a quiet place in yourself, start to see actually some colored balls, lights that actually come down and land on the trees. It's new incoming force, and these colored balls is what we today are hanging in the Christmas tree. So like the letter X, which means Christmas time, this is a time of new incoming force. And the solstices have always been, you could say, periods of polarized force. It's not like the equinoxes where things equal out, but you will also always have a strong, you could almost say, opposition between the old and the new. And the special thing about this solstice, where this new force comes in, it's a bit like the signal that makes our heart beat. And our heart is a bit like the earth. This is a time of a new force, and it comes in electrically. And, as it starts to come into our planet, and, as we know in springtime, the first physical results of what is called this green force that comes in with Christmas comes out of the ground. And then it runs on through the year. Now, this solstice, as I said, is different. And one of the big differences is that we are seeing not just, we're not just looking at a solstice, we're also looking at an incredible important alignment between, and we call that a conjunction, between two planets. And these are the planets of Saturn and the planet of Jupiter. And they are actually moving out of, the Capricorn house into the Aquarius house. And they will be joined in 2023 by Pluto, which is the planet of transformation. But what is this saying, this Saturn thing and this Jupiter thing? Now, Saturn is in a way, as you might know if you go in mythology, the father of Jupiter. He's God that in a way was once, the leading god and became, the underground. And he became the god of the underworld. And so in a way, in a short summation, you could say that Saturn is standing for everything that is old, and it is standing for boundaries. And, I'm sitting here with a Capricorn in the room. Lauge is a Capricorn, and Capricorns have the cunning ability that they when they are born, they start off old, and as they go on in life, they become younger and younger. And it's like Lucas gave me the great compliment that I look so young, but I've got my Capricorn as an ascendant, so that might be helpful. Anyway, Capricorn stands for the old. It is also an earth element, and we're now moving into this conjunction. And what is so special about this conjunction? That normally happens every 20 years. But this conjunction is different, because normally they call it a conjunction when the planets meet in the celestial sky, like for example, just a little bit above each other. They already call that a conjunction. But this time, which is very, very unique, Saturn and Jupiter are actually meeting each other right at the point. And that means that the planets overlap each other. And the light of these planets, therefore, will become increasingly bright. It is thought by researchers that this might have been the Star of Bethlehem. Well, Jupiter, where Saturn stands for the old, the hermit, an earth sign. Jupiter is actually related to fire. And something which is so special about Jupiter is that Jupiter is a planet that is on its way to become a sun. Scientists know this. Jupiter is radiating at the moment more energy than it receives. It's on its way to become a sun. And we come back to this because, it's very interesting, because what it suggests is that everything in the whole of creation is either growing or dying, living, or you could say withering. It's called the law of two. And even moons, planets, suns, they are in development. And we might not see it because this takes billions of years. But Jupiter is the sign of the risen Savior. And so we're moving from something that is old into something which is completely new. And because we're also moving into the house of Aquarius, which is an air sign, we're moving out of the house of Saturn. We're moving from things that are more fixed, more physical, more earthbound, into something you could say that has more to do with the element of air. Now, air is difficult to catch, and that's one of the problems of air. It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen these people that walk on their toes and they're with a hat, like this, a bit like birds. They walk like air signs. They are the intellectuals, and so you could say, Aquarius, which is in an air sign, that we're moving from a more earthy, rusted time into a very airy time, but it's also a very, you could say, you can't grasp it. You can't put air in a box. It will drift out. And so it's going to be a time where things can be very misty, very hazy to see what's going on. What is the direction we need to go into? It's a very unknown and open time, but a time with a lot of promise. And so this is one of the things going on. So I spoke about the winter solstice, and I spoke about this alignment. But there's more going on. And as we go on, it will become more and more interesting. One of the things that is going on at the moment as well, that some of you might know, is that we are in a time of a grand solar minimum. And I explain what that is about. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a curve that is symbolizing the cycle of the sun. And our sun has a cycle that is actually lasting 22 years. Now, this is a very interesting number if you start to study the esoterics and the ancient wisdoms. The sun, what it does, if I look here at the number 0, it starts to increase in power and it becomes more hot. And at the time of its maximum, it starts to flare. It starts to give away energy. And this solar maximum, we know that when there's solar flares or a solar maximum, it can disturb things like computers, electrical equipment on our Earth. What then is happening is that, after this maximum, it goes down and it comes to the 0 line, where you see all these minimums. That's what's called a zero of a solar minimum. That is at the 11th year. What then happens is that the sun changes polarity and the North Pole becomes the South Pole becomes the North Pole, and then again it starts to increase and build, and we have another solar maximum, and out it runs. Now, what is so important about this? Because if you go back in time, the Egyptians, they knew about this cycle. They knew about the sun going through the cycle of 22 years. And when they then divided the number 22 with the 7 colors of the rainbow, or the 7 colors of the chakra, what they got to was the famous number P, a number that is a universal number which can be found when you divide a circle with its diameter. Now, Egypt, which was also the origin of what we call the tarot. And it is very interesting that if you look at the tarot, that the tarot has got 21 cards. And then there is an added card, which is card number 22, which is the Fool card. Now, if you go back into history and you go, as an example, to England, you know, the tarot was there for a long time forbidden because it got brought basically to Europe by gypsies, and it was seen by the Anglican Church as a satanic tool. You know, it was forbidden. So the church in England demanded the Fool card to be put into the tarot. Now, the Fool card is in a way number 22. It's the end of one cycle, but also the beginning of a new one. And any cycle, you know, it's always, in the end, it's where the old gets denied by the Fool card and something new can start. And that's very interesting because these 22 years, we are actually in the year 2020. We are, in a way, in the year of the Fool. And, you know, you could also say that the year where people can easily get fooled by what's going on. And it is also a year, therefore, that is a bridge, a very significant bridge between a long cycle that has been and a new cycle that is to come. Now, the most interesting thing is that if we look at these solar minimums, where the sun is very low in its activity, and it is giving less heat and radiation to our planet, something happens. And what happens that at the poles, there's holes that start around the poles, and as they become and approach a solar minimum, these holes, they actually become bigger. And what they called are corona holes. Now, the interesting thing with corona holes is that corona holes are actually entry points for cosmic force or cosmic energy. And we call that cosmic rays. And it is through these holes, these corona holes on the sun, that energy that is even higher than the sun can come through the portal of the sun into our planet Earth. Now, what is coming, you know, from what is coming through these cosmic rays? And one of the things they know is that viruses can travel for millions of years through our universe. And as an example, viruses can come in through cosmic rays that can come from things like supernovae, black holes, and they can enter in our planet. But also the whole idea of influenza or influence, because that's the Italian word for influence, it's a time of new influences. Now, with a normal, you could say a normal winter solstice, you get the new influence of the sun. But at this time, because we're entering a grand solar minimum, we're actually getting a completely new energy coming in. And it's cosmic rays. Now, they carry all kinds of new influences. Now, why is it called a grand solar minimum? Because normally this only takes a few years and then it's over. But this grand solar minimum, you know, it's about to last for till they think around 2053 or longer. Because of this high force coming in from the universe, they even expect the temperatures to drop, also because the sun is less active. And but it will therefore cause, you know, all kinds of new influences. It can cause new varitic changes. Now, it has an influence also on us humans, and who knows, you know, what could happen with all kinds of unused faculties in us that could get switched on because of higher frequencies that at the moment enter our planet. Now, it is said by the ancients in many cultures that if you study man, you study the universe, and if you study the universe, you study man. So if we are made in the image of not just God, which is masculine, but also in the image of creation, which is feminine, our human body or our human complex, which is perhaps a better word, gives all kinds of clues. And scientific research is actually showing many, many fascinating things. One of the things that is recently discovered here in 2019 is that 60 million years ago, our planet did not have two poles, a North Pole and a South Pole. It actually had 5 poles. It had a North Pole, a South Pole, a West Pole and an East Pole, and a little wandering pole. And it is very interesting because, if you study natural laws or you study numbers, what is the number 5 got to do with? And, it's very interesting that if the idea is that, planets can develop and grow up, might it have started as a 5-fold thing? And now it is actually already an octave higher. And I'll talk about that later. But if we look at 5, where we can look at our hand, and what we see is in a way a North Pole, a South Pole, a West Pole, and an East Pole. Or you could relate it to the 4 seasons, where each of our fingers has 3 months. And what is happening at the winter solstice? It's our 5th thing. You could say, it's like our arms, legs, and our head. This is the 5th thing. Or like the 4 chambers of our heart and the signal that makes it beat. It's the 5th thing that's coming in, and it is, it's the movable pole that can connect to the other poles. Now, if our planet 60 billion years ago had 5 poles, something happened and it started to develop into 2 poles. The question is, what will happen in the coming years, in the coming new time we are entering into? Will we still have 2 poles? We know that the North Pole and the South Pole are wandering away from their position with great speed. And just the last 200 years, it has been moving. Our North Pole, magnetic North Pole, has been moving from Alaska, and it is moving at the moment with a speed of 40 kilometers a year into Russia. Another thing is, we know as well that the Earth's magnetic field is weakening. And for the last 200 years, it has been weakening with 9%. Now, what is happening with this solar minimum? What is happening with this solar minimum is that a solar minimum, because of this cosmic rays, it will weaken the electromagnetic field even more. And the electromagnetic field of our planet is roughly divided in 3 layers. So if you look at it at my finger, it is 3 layers. But the top level gets inactivated. So with the solar minimum, the top layer of the electromagnetic field of our planet is not there, which only leaves 2 layers. Now, going back to these 5 poles, these 4 poles, the North Pole, South Pole, West Pole, and East Pole, they are extending in their influence throughout the electromagnetic field of the planet. But this 5th pole isn't. And it's a bit like our thumb that's got 2 parts. If the top layer is getting removed, then this wandering pole, the electrical part is getting switched on, and our thumb is related to our head. So the question is, what is going to happen with our head? And if the electromagnetic field of our planet is, rapidly weakening, and, there's cosmic rays coming in, you could say that we got less protection from, our planet, and we're more open to the influences of the universe. Now, this is going to change an enormity. The interesting thing is, if you look at the human body, as I said, you study man, you study the universe, that here we got the 5 fingers of a hand, 4 plus 1. And then we got these 2 bones, like the 2 poles, North Pole, South Pole. And the next one is 1 bone. And there's a development here. Like a child that is in a way starting off like a little pentagram in the womb. You know, at the age of 12, 1 and 2, having starting to develop its own mind, wanting to make choices. And you could ask yourself, okay, you know, why would we want to make choices? Well, is it possible that we're here on this planet, this place of learning, which itself got 4 seasons and a signal that makes it beat, to learn not just about nature, about what it means to be human and what is the purpose of life? So are we here to, in a way, make choices? And that is what we need to look at. And that these choices we make can connect us to lower energies, middle energies, or higher energies in creation. And if that's the case, this time becomes very, very interesting. Because what's happening is that with a planet that is less protected and therefore less active, its aura is weak, it's down. With the sun that is less active, we got basically, again, 2 polarities. And because what is active on the one hand is the moon. And as we will see, the moon is the most physical level in creation. And on the other hand, we got something which has to do with the cosmic influence. Now, if we're on this brink of this new time, the question is, you know, where are we going to go as a human race, but also individually? What is it that we choose and stand for? Therefore, this time is, as I see it, a most special time. And to be able to deeper understand that, we need to travel back, you know, I would say into history, what has gone on our planet, because if one old paradigm is dying out and one new one is starting, we basically need to see, you know, what happened before us and what might come. And if one epoch, if we're coming out of one epoch and we are entering a new one, then it could be said, well, a bit like Rome when it was in its decay. When things are in its decay, they're struggling for their last bits of life. Because everything wants to survive. So also the old paradigm is, you know, struggling to survive. And on the other hand, something new is happening. What is onsetting, what is new, what has not happened, is we are hardly conscious about. And we will see that. We also see why later in this presentation. We will see that it's coming from a different place in the universe than ever before. But the old paradigm, you know, is still struggling massively to possess, in that sense, humans, to keep us where we are. And there we're looking at old ways of going on, hierarchical power structures. We're looking at outdated ways and means. We're looking at, you know, ways humans treat each other. We somewhere know and feel we need to leave behind to be able to move on. So we're going to make a journey, and like Lucas said, on the end of this journey there will be time for questions. But in a very, very short time, I need to get you, and I hope you can stay with it, you know, into the natural laws and into solar mechanics and what happened far back in history before the flood. And therefore I need to be very exact, very concrete, because I try to transmit, you know, years of study and knowledge in a very, very small amount of time. Now, okay, I've got a lot of papers here which I'm looking at, and well, let's start off with this one first. And here you see, I hope you can read it. You know, I like it about this. It is all, you know, handwritten on pieces of paper. And you can't see my head now. I just go a little bit to the side, like this. And yes. Well, what you see here is a diagram. Now, let's say we go back to the origin of everything. Now, the origin of everything, which I mean the origin of life, the origin of the universe. And you look at all creational myths, somewhere, somehow, there was something of an origin. And what we understand from it is that it's not based in time, it's not based in physical matter, it has no movement, it is not something, but it is also not something. Somewhere the origin of everything, which had no boundaries, had in itself the most fine energy we can think of, but something in it, something urged it to, seek consciousness. And the way you can imagine this is, imagine you are alone, drifting alone in space, like, what is the song from Bowie, about Captain, forgot his name. Anyway, in my tin can, floating through the universe. Now let's say you are in your little tin can there, and you're the only one, You will not meet other humans. You will not meet other intelligence, and therefore, you will not know who you are because you got nothing to reflect. You haven't got someone else to talk to. And so let's say that original state was seeking consciousness. And one of the first things it did, it started to duplicate itself and it started to create what is called creation. And creation is feminine. And creation one can liken onto the heart. In a very, very simple analogy. It's the heart out which everything else started to appear. And out of that heart, out of that womb, the masculine principle got born. We call it God. And that's the head of the universe, the master orchestrator. And all the time, energy is flowing from the origin to creation to God. And then the energy is in a way coming into our universe. God is the creator of our universe, expanding it, and what he left behind was lesser levels of energy. And so it's interesting when you look at the word God, it says grow or diminish, because God, the masculine principle, started to create order in everything. And that's what you see in many of the creational myths. He started to create the natural laws. Now, what is a natural law? A natural law is, you could say, it's a universal influence to which all things must respond. So you got the law of 2, you got the law of 3, you got the law of 4, the law of 5. And as an example, when you start to study numbers and you start to collect examples of, for example, the number 4 in nature, you will very quickly discover that number 4, as an example, has to do with cycles. The number 3 is cosmic, the number 5 is relating to human, the number 6 is relating to everything that's fixed. Very strong building forms like, the molecular structures, diamonds, honey rates, that they sixth formed. And you wonder why the Antichrist is 666, because it basically says 6 is in a fix. It's basically saying fixed in your conscious, fixed in your semi-conscious, and fixed in your unconscious. There is no development possible. Now, back to what is called the ray of creation. God, being the number 1 orchestrator, started, in his expansion of the universe, leave behind lesser levels of energy. And the first is purgatory, which is, some people think that's the name for hell, but that is the Catholic version of it. It's not, it's a level of energy. I won't go too much into it right now. Then there's a shock point, and the next level is the intergalactic level. Then we come into the level of stars, the level of suns, and then there's a shock point again, and it brings us down to what we can call planets and moons. Now, moons are very, very physical. It's the most physical form, in that sense, the end station of this whole ray of creation. So everything is moving, therefore, from energy, slowly into matter. Now, if God keeps doing this, and he's repeating his number one action, it basically says that at a certain point, all the energy that's up here gets frozen into matter. Now, and nothing will come back. We need to look at it. So, if creation would go on this way, God would keep expanding the universe, basically in the end, we're nothing more than moons. The interesting thing is with the moon, is that the moon, when we look at it, it reflects the light of the sun. So the moon is not just an end station, it's also a mirror back. But the thing is that the moon has no atmosphere. And we got this in expressions in language, it's like, when you say someone is a moony, he's basically a bit daft, and you can even hear it when people are a bit slow and moony on a Monday. It's a bit like a clumsy day, and you ask a person, what have you done today? Don't know, When they make that sound, it's a moon frequency sound, because they basically, they're not too bright. They can't think. And the letter U, which is like a cup shape, it's a bit like the moon. It's a cup that can get filled up. Now, the interesting thing with the moon is that, the moon, the scientists discovered it not that long ago. It's actually, not just rock. It is actually already in its next stage of growth. And because one of the natural laws, the universal natural laws, is the law of two, everything grows or dies. And we've got this whole aspect, of a moon that is able to grow. Everything grows. So as the moon is circling around our planet's electromagnetic atmosphere, every time it's full moon and it comes into the electromagnetic atmosphere, it sucks from the planet food for its own development. And that's why full moon is always a bit of a strange time. You ask taxi chauffeurs here in Copenhagen, people behave more weird when it's full moon. They know it in hospitals, don't do operations, because the moon has also an influence on the waters of our planet. In Holland in 1953, a big part of the country, was flooded. There was high water, but it was a time full moon, and the moon pulled the waters up, and it rolled over the dikes, and a big part got flooded. So the moon is our big magnet in the sky, and you could say it is drawing away all the energy that our planet no longer needs. Now, but there is a theory, which is the growing Earth theory, and also the growing moon theory, that basically says, that our planet, once upon a time, also has been in a moon state. And when you look and you go back to, our planet, there's been a time that all the continents fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. Before the time of what they call Pangea, it was like the planet was smaller, and then it started to grow and grow and grow and expand. And as it did, it started to collect water. Now, these 7 stages, of development that or these 7 levels in creation, we find back in many things. We ourselves, we are a chakra system, and we got this very, very interesting same division, where, we got our head, we got this level, purgatory, and this would be in the chakra system related to violet. This would be indigo. Then here, we've got a crossover of nerves. And what we get is here, in the throat chakra, the color blue, the lungs are green, this whole area here, of the stomach and chest is yellow. And then we get into the other shock point, which is the orange chakra, and the root chakra. Now, if you look at organic life, plant life, it also goes through 7 stages of growth. It starts with the seed, which is like physical. And it can lay in the earth for millions of years. It's, until the time that there is a signal, an energy signal that quickens it. And there's water and minerals in the ecology that can sustain its growth, and it starts to grow. What it then does, it starts to develop a germ, and then it comes out of darkness into the light, into the sunlight. It becomes a sprout, and this white germ starts to take on color. It becomes green. And then it moves, it starts to develop, in this level, stem and leaves. And then it comes to flower bud, which relates to the throat. And then it breaks to another octave. And as it does, it starts to open up a flower. And when the flower is open, it starts to signal to, if it's a red flower, to the energy of red and the energy of that specific flower that it can get fertilized. And so flowers are like cups that can receive energy and draw it back, just like our hand can receive energy and bring it into our system. Now, these 7 levels, if you look at the number 7, it's always got to do with maintenance structures. And it's very interesting that we've got 7 holes in our head. And our planet has got a rainbow with 7 colors. We've got 7 days in the week. We've got the 7 planets of the ancients. It's always talking, about an octave. But when you move out of that octave, when you move out of this planet, when you go through, the 7 spectrum colors, the 7th chakra, you come to the crown chakra, and suddenly you come into what Buddha calls the 8th heaven. You get enlightened. Your pineal gland, and we have to talk about that later, gets switched on. And when it does, it can start to, in the aura around the head, develop what is called a sun disk or a halo. So this is a little bit, about just a very, very tiny bit about natural laws. There's so much more to tell. But what it is saying is that energy, pure of energy, is moving away from that state into lesser states of energy. And as it does, it becomes more and more physical and frozen. And I'm looking here. I take this here, this cup, and it is very hard. But if you look at it, it's actually made of atoms with incredible space in between. It's just that these atoms don't move, and so it is atoms in a fixed state. And so there's been one movement in creation from energy to physical. Now that movement from purest energy into physical matter, into the end station of moon, has been you could say, the first establishment of creation. And everything in there is responding to automatic programmings, automatic laws. So we got, all the different cycles. The cycle from breathing in and out, the cycle of day and night, the cycle of our heart, the cycle of New Year, the great celestial year, where we go around in the Milky Way in 25,006 years. Cycles that are even far greater. Cycles in cycles in cycles. And everything is, ordered and orchestrated to function automatically. Now, the thing is, if creation wants to become conscious of itself, why would it create something that is completely automatic? If I would create something outside of myself, and the only thing I get back is a programmed response, it becomes very boring. You got these Japanese people today, they're living in these apartments, mostly men, and they got this kind of doll there. It's a programmed computer that basically says, when they wake up, hello darling, and good morning, and it's kind of artificial wife, but it's not inventive. It doesn't say new things. It's programmed response, and you don't get anything new coming back. So let's say that our universe, like in childhood, before puberty, was establishing this whole automatic platform in all kinds of different levels and layers of energy. from God's purgatory to galaxies to stars, suns, planets and moons. Now, it might have been that, before the human came on this planet, there has been other, civilizations throughout our universe, stationed on different levels. And so let's say that, you've got races that are not humanoid, but they live, as an example, on the level of sun or star. And, they wouldn't have the freedom that the human race has got to develop. And the way I want to illustrate this is by this diagram. I hope you can see it. It is very small written. But scientists have discovered that the background radiation of our universe is infrared. Now, this is very interesting because when you think of a white star with white light and you are in a spaceship and you are actually traveling away from this white light. So with the light, the strange thing what happens is what they call a red shift. That white light starts to turn red. And as we are still expanding in our universe, therefore the background radiation moving away from the core turns red. And so red is is a color of automatic robotic establishment. And imagine that, like I said, there's been all kinds of intelligences, but they are, from angel structures to universal, highly developed races, but they don't have the same ability like we have to co-create, to give back. And that's very interesting because suppose that our blue planet, although it's 4.5 billion years old, the life on it, and the human race has come very late on the evolutionary scene. And let's say that, our universe has developed to the level of puberty. And so the whole automatic array of creation is established. All the automatic processes, the different races and angel structures are in place. Everything is working. Animals, they are programmed to respond. Plants. But if you don't want to get a programmed response back, you need to do something else. And at a certain point, what happened in the human development is that there's been a permission for humans to develop choice. Basically what also happens in puberty. Children start to think for themselves and suddenly they don't like their parents, they're irritating and they don't want this, they don't want that. And it was even known in ancient Egypt, because if you go back there, at the age of 12 to 13, the rich families would hire a scribe, and the scribe would write down everything that the child would say yes to in the age between 12 and 13. Because up to the age of 12, mostly what is active is the automatic brain in us, which is mostly located in our spine. After the age of 12, our head gets active, and we start to, get... There's a police car running by. Our yes brain, our head gets active. We can make choices. Now, so if you look, and this is very important in the understanding of history, is that we've got what is called a red shift. That is basically when we are moving away from the basket or core of creation. And it comes from a unification, but it splits up in a diversification. Now, then there's another shift, and that is when you travel towards this white star. And what you have, it's not just the speed of light you're meeting, but now you're also traveling with your spaceship. So you're actually traveling in relation to the light that is coming towards you with a greater speed than the speed of light. And what happens is that white light starts to turn blue. Now we know the exact same phenomena. If you've got a nail of iron that you hold in a flame. First it starts to turn red and orange, which is the low energy. And as the energy increases, it goes to orange to yellow, then it becomes white. But the highest energy is actually blue. Now suppose now that after the establishment of this whole automatic ray of creation, this redshift, the universe started to create places that were blue shift. And in blue shift, what is happening? It's actually coming from planets like ours, our blue planet, places of multiplicity, where there's so much differences, but they all need to work together, and a response needs to go back up the ray of creation. So here we are, having free choice, and we've got an incredible table of plenty to learn from and put things together in ways that have not done before, which can relate to new art, new music, new insights, but also the combination of all kinds of forces we can attract from the universe that we can combine on new ways. And if we make the development up back to the core of creation, we actually can hand it back to where it comes from. So the idea of becoming a co-creator, and that's been the great promise. Now, so a blue universe basically says, you see it here with this multiplicity of life. And more, they start to find out that all this life on the planet we live on, plant life, animal life, humans, they're all connected to the electromagnetic field of our planet. And they all need to work together. And it is a very interesting thing how things balance each other out. You can see it with certain species. You've got foxes and rabbits, and one year there's many foxes, and they ate many rabbits, but the year after there's not so many rabbits, and therefore you will have less foxes. Everything works out and balances. Now, this red shift and blue shift, they are very, very important in the understanding of what happened in world history. By the way, it's like before we move on to that, even a virus, is going through these 7 stages. It's like, so imagine a coronavirus, it's like, and that's the interesting thing. What makes us able to catch a virus? And that's a good question. Because if a virus is not just chemical, but is actually connected to an electrical frequency, then it needs to find a host that is matching that frequency. Now, and it's interesting, with the word influenza or influence, that often people get sick or can get a cold, often 6 or 7 days after they have had an emotional drama or outburst. They're more vulnerable to become sick. So let's say, I'm a virus and I've got a specific frequency, let's say E. Now what if I come through this cosmic ray, that is coming through the corona hole in the sun, they're coming into this weakened electromagnetic field, and there's a human, and that aura might also a little bit weak, and there's this E frequency. And if there is cells in that human that resonate on the same frequency, E, because that's the way that human thinks or feels, these things start to resonate. And what happens is that, a virus is in a way landing on a cell. That's the red stage, and as we know, a virus is mostly genetic material. Now what it then does, it starts to try to penetrate into the cell. Now, and then you got the shock point. Now it's in the cell, and what it does, it starts to uncoat itself. It starts to unfold itself. And then, it starts to grow, and then there's another stage where it starts to organize itself, and then there's another shock point, like in that ray of creation, where suddenly the cell explodes and all these new viruses that have overtaken the DNA of the cell spread out. And as they do, they attracted to these energies. And these E energies that are attached to these viruses seek new cells. So, and that's the question, why, and that's why I really wonder, why is there in the whole corona research hardly be done any research into the research of frequencies? Because I'm sure that there are certain frequencies, certain electromagnetic frequencies that would actually kill off that coronavirus. Yet we don't hear anything about it. We're forced back from electromagnetic energies into the worlds of physics and chemicals. which basically say our rescue will be a vaccine, which I don't believe in. Basically, because the ways vaccines are made. So, oh yeah, it's like here this. I forgot about it. This is this picture about our Earth growing, which I talked about. Everything grows or dies. Now, let's say that our universe is full of cycles, and our planet, has also gone through cycles. Not just day and night, and not just the great celestial year, but let's say that one of the things is that our planet's got an electromagnetic field. It's a bit like our aura. They call it the Van Allen belt, discovered in 1950 by the American Van Allen. Very nice looking guy. And the interesting thing about it is that when you look at the Van Allen belt, when it is strong, it's a bit like a balloon without holes. You can actually blow it up. So what happens is that our planet, through thousands and thousands and thousands of years, is collecting sun energy. And like the sun, it's got a planetary maximum and a planetary minimum. It got periods where the electromagnetic field is very strong, and it had periods when the electromagnetic field was very weak. Now suppose that in times where the electromagnetic field is very, very strong, the solar energy, that comes from a higher level in creation, is basically able to be kept, and it will influence. It will influence all organic life on this planet. And so what you see is like, and that's the interesting thing as we're going to travel back, has to be a golden age, or a kind of paradisical stage that so many myths and legends and religions talk about, that we're at the origin of mankind, where our planet was actually an elevated energy circumstance, and it influenced all life. It's interesting when you go back into history that you see, that people were apparently far stronger. You're talking about this Hercules type. And even in the Middle Ages, I was surprised, I don't know like you, but as a child, I went with my father to this museum, and there was all these knights in armor. And then, we were, the guy that was in the museum said, to me, you want to lift that sword? And I was lifting this sword, and it was about 20 kilo. And he told me, yeah, these guys would be standing on these, battlefields and battling with these swords with each other for hours in a row. These feats of strength, it's almost impossible today. It's like exceptional. And it's almost like when you go further back into history, it's almost like people were stronger. And also, funnily enough, they became older. Now you would say, yeah, did they? But, if you look in the Bible, you look in other, mystic writings, there's this whole sense of there was a golden age in which people were able to become much, 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 much older. Now the funny thing is, we've got cells in a human body that can become 1500 years old. And where are they located? In our head. Our brain cells can become around 1500 years old. So why is it that we are not becoming 1500 years old? Well, someone would say, oh yeah, that's just an accident. But why would creation, or go through such an extent to create something like this and making cells that can last for 1500 years, and it's an accident? Just like some people say, well, the pineal gland is, expendable after birth. So let's say there's been a kind of golden time where people were able to become much older. Now you see that in the Bible, where after the flood, just after the flood and before the flood, you see Methuselah, he's becoming 1,000 years old. Enoch, the son, the grandfather of Noah, 1,000 years. Noah, he becomes 900 and whatever, 56. And as we go on, you read that after the flood, suddenly God, whoever he is, is saying, you know, from now on, humans can only become 120 years old. Very strange. So what happened in history? What happened while we suddenly were in this golden era, and suddenly, you know, where, you know, humans were stronger, healthier, you know, a bit like paradise, all the vegetation was beautiful. And probably because of the higher energies, everything was clairvoyant. Yeah. And suddenly something happened and we moved away from that conductivity, and something happened on this planet which was a real disaster. Now, so I want to take you therefore to the idea that our planet, which is a blue planet, is very unique. And, you know, throughout the many, many millennia, you know, especially in conductive times where our planet, you know, was powered, you know, you could basically say spaceships came from other places here to create what I would call the blue human. I'll come back to that. You know, to populate different places in the universe. And this might sound like a very, very strange idea. But, you know, already in the 70s, there was, you know, especially in America, you know, many that worked for the NASA, and, you know, there was all kinds of stories. It was a whole decade of stories about spaceships, you know, and I don't know, Spielberg in the early 80s, I think, Visitors of the Third Kind, you know, it was all about extraterrestrial travel. Now, many of these more secret reports, you know, they're all telling about spaceships coming to our planet Earth, but a lot of them are in trouble. And the idea being that these spaceships, you know, were far more easy to come to planet Earth when the electromagnetic sphere was far more intact. And at this moment in time, we're living actually in a very low conductive atmosphere. An atmosphere that is not very charged, an atmosphere that doesn't promote our health, that doesn't promote very high thoughts, you know, and does, you know, and if you want to become clairvoyant, you have to work for it. You have to do your personal development work. So the interesting thing is as well that when the sun is powering its energy into our planet, and it had a very strong magnetic field, that this power gets built up. And because of that, like a balloon, the aura of our planet has extended. Yeah, it became bigger and bigger and bigger, and at times it shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And it's a bit like breathing in and breathing out, like day and night. And our planet has been at times at a planetary maximum, and its aura became actually so big that it started to overlap with the aura of the sun. It came in the influence sphere, directly influence sphere of the sun. And what happened was, you know, and this is perhaps a very, very strange thing, is that because of these high energies of the sun, our planet started to become sun-like. Now, what do I mean with that? If you look at the sun, our sun is burning off hydrogen gases that it, you know, can basically transform into helium and oxygen, and then other elements, but mostly hydrogen. Now, hydrogen is a gas that is very, very burnable, and oxygen is as well. And if you look at water, H2O, it's actually consisting out of these two components, hydrogen and oxygen. So if we were to split all the water on the planet, you know, we would live on the sun. You know, it's a solar furnace. But what could cause that split up? Now that's an interesting thing, because water can change into air, and if you split air gases, you know, you can actually develop fire. Very interesting in relation to this time where we're moving away from Capricorn into Aquarius. We're moving from a physical time into an air time. And the question is, you know, with these cosmic rays, how will that influence the elements on our planet as water? Now, if the sun is burning off water, what the most interesting thing is as well is that scientists have discovered that by rays they can project into the sun, and they can measure that by infrared measurements and whatever. And don't ask me how they do it, but they discovered to their surprise, that when you go more into with these measuring devices, not the measuring devices themselves, but the beams they produce into the core of the sun is actually becoming cooler. Now, might it be that our sun, the outer radiation is actually water burning off, hydrogen and oxygen, but that are behind the corona of the sun, there is actually a planet. And might it be that our planet, at a certain point, has been like that? A time when the waters were up. Now, this might sound very, very odd, but if you go into all kinds of myths, especially South American myths from the Aztec, Inca, Maya, they're talking about a succession of some planet, some planet, some planet. So they're talking about a succession of worlds. And what they all the time are talking about, that there's a succession of that our planet will be destroyed by water, then by fire, then by water, then by fire, then by water, then by fire. The fire being the waters going up, the planet heating up, the waters getting to the outer edge and starting to burn. Now, even Nostradamus talked about this, and Mother Shipton, a very famous clairvoyant in England, somewhere in, I think it was in the 16th century, whatever it was. And Mother Shipton said, one day will come that men will walk on the green sky again. Now imagine that all the blue water is up and it starts to burn. So it becomes like a yellow star, because that's what our sun is. And that light is reflecting back, through the water, and we would see it as green, because yellow and blue make green. Now, all the creational myths, or many of them, and I had, I said to Lucas and Lauke, it's like when you come at my place at home, I got 500 of these creational myths at my table. I got 500 stories about giants and all kinds of stuff. And there's a lot of similarities between these original creational myths. Because what they're talking about is that there's been, a kind of flood, a time when the waters came down, and, then there's been apparently, some people surviving in the boat. Now, even if in the Bible it's called Noah, but if they're, with his wife and 3 sons. But you go to South America, it's a man and his wife and his 3 sons. You go to India, he's not called Noah, he's called Nama. He's got a wife and 3 sons. You go to Japan, it's the same story. And you wonder, what is this story trying to tell us? Now, one of the things that these stories tell us is that before the flood, there was no rainbow. People could not see a rainbow. Now, we know we can see a rainbow when the light of the sun is falling through drops of water. But suppose that our planet has been in a sun state. And there was not something like day and night. There was a kind of, constant glow of green. And the atmosphere was moderate over the whole planet. And, the things that we know as ice caps were maybe not there in the same way. Or the ice caps were moving. That's a whole other story. But suppose that there has been this great flood, then the question is, what caused it? And the interesting thing is as well that you look at these creational myths, many of them talk about suddenly the moon was visible, suddenly the sun was visible, as if they were not visible before the flood. So what was there before the flood? Many creational stories talk as well about that our planet had a crust of mud and water around it. Now imagine that there has been a time that where our planet is breathing in and breathing out, and the aura of the planet is expanding, and with that the waters in a way go up, and by kind of nuclear reaction split up into air, into gases, and it catches fire on the outside. But with it, when the waters move up, it might have taken a lot of organic material with it. And it's very interesting how many of the creational myths talk about a crust around the earth. And you wonder how that relates to the hollow earth theory, where we at a certain point we have been living inside a crust. Now, in that sun-like state, what happened was that the corona of the sun, the electromagnetic atmosphere, the aura of the sun, started to connect with our planet, and it started to create, that a bit of a kind of helix form. And so if this is the sun, this is our Earth, what is very interesting is that the Egyptians, they talking about, being on the planet, especially the writings of the early kingdom, they talk a lot about traveling the Great Lake, back to where they came from. There's always a reference to the winding waterways, the Great Lake, and might it have been that in these times, the conductivity that was on the sun was also as a conductivity on the earth. And so it was travel. And let's say these Egyptians, they were not from planet Earth, they were not blue shift, they were red shift. Higher developed beings than the human, but not having the same possibility as freedom. And let's say there was a time that they came here to be the teachers, the watchers. They instructed the human race, they helped it along. And all was in peace and harmony, and great civilizations all around the globe got born. And it's very interesting that the Egyptian thing, or you could call it the Anunnaki thing, or whatever name you want to give it, was not just something that was local to Egypt. Because if you study the architecture throughout the world, from South America to temples in China, to Egypt, the ways that these big stones and temples are constructed is everywhere similar. So somewhere there's a bit been the same kind of intelligence. And somewhere you see also all these kind of animal figures, appearing on rocks, from the Nazca Desert to the White Cliffs of Dover, where it's almost like there's this white horse where they're almost signaling here we're selling horses to something of extraterrestrials coming in a ship. We know about Antarctica being uncovered with ice, and the cards of Peary Rice from 1500, which shows an Antarctica that's not covered, and it can only be done from the sky. So what is it that has not been told to us in our history lessons on school? Now, let's say that these redshift Egyptians, they did not only come from the sun, they came from other star belts as well. Let's, as an example, say Orion. And one of the things they did on our planet was building pyramids. Why pyramids? Because pyramids, and we come to that, are structures that can actually are a bit like batteries. Now, in a time when our planet was at its Earth maximum, you could say, it was very sun-like, and the atmosphere was like the sun. But at a certain point, it went down the curve. Now, as it went down the curve, you get more and more the idea, also in the Egyptian writings before the flood, we don't have them, but after the flood, that our planet was in a way the underworld. And, I want to read you something up, which is a very, very interesting thing. Because let's say these help us. Coming from the sun, these Egyptians, they came to the planet and something went wrong. Now, all over the world, you see therefore these creational myths that after the flood, there's a new humankind, a new human race that was not there before. And somewhere, somehow, when you look at the Bible, and you look at Genesis or the genes of Isis, it says in chapter 1, verse 6, it was in those days, that the sons of the gods looked at the daughters of the earth and saw they were lovely. And they went down to the earth and they started to make love with these daughters of the earth. And it was in those times that the Elohim, or the men of fame, were walking the earth. Now, who are the Elohim? This is giants. The interesting thing is, giants appear everywhere on the world. We call it also in the Nordic mythology, the Ymir. And so what were these giants? Now, there's a book which is called the Book of Enoch, and I want to read up a little part of it, which talks about this. It's a book that's been taken out of the Bible. And here it comes. I put on my glasses. And here it is. Book of Enoch, chapter 6. Very interesting why it's called chapter 6. Okay. And it came to pass, when the children of man had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Semyaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And so they apparently knew this was not the right thing to do. These genetics should not be mixed up. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath and bind ourselves by mutual implications not to abandon this plan, but to actually do this thing. Then they swore all together and bound themselves by mutual implications. And they were in all 200, who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. Now let's suppose this is not just happened here, but perhaps spread around the globe. But what happens is then, it says, so they came down and they started to take unto themselves wives, this is chapter 7, and each chose for himself one. And they began to get into them and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of man. And when man could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. They began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. And so this is the time, apparently a time in world history, where you start to see certain things like cannibalism, vampirism, war, murder, all of these things. And then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. Now, I need to just have a check on the time, because I don't know how much we've got. 45 minutes. Okay, so we're doing well. I need to move you to something else, and give me a second. I need to go through my amazing stack of papers to find it. And so here, we've got the epoch cycle of the planet, like I explained before. It's like a solar maximum and minimum. And these cycles, they change, and one cycle is lasting 32,000 years with the planetary maximum, and then it's changing from a sun state, where the waters are up, into a planetary state. Now, what happened when all these things happened? It's like you could say the energy levels of this golden era got polluted. It should not have happened. It was before its time. And so now I just need to find my things. Yeah, here we are. So if you look at this one, you see, this was the original, how it should be, arrangement of what I call the astral light of our planet, the electromagnetic atmosphere. And you see, the red ring, which is on the outside, is the most physical. It's the lowest level. We call it level 7 of the astral light. It's basically dedicated to plant life. But when humans connect to it, it's a very low level. It's the level, therefore, in the occult of murder, anger, rape, violence, and a lot of these kind of things. Then the next level, high up in the stratosphere, originally was orange, governing animal life. And, this is basically where human development is fixed. It doesn't move on. It's basically a humdrum life, and if we translate it to our times today, it would be go to work, eat, sleep, have sex, eat your sausage, watch a bit of television shows, go to bed, wake up, Tuesday morning, go to your work, have an argument with your wife, with your boss, eat some sausages, have sex, and so on and so on. That's level 6, level of boredom. Level 5, which is the yellow level, is the level of learning. And that's where you become interested, start to ask questions. Level 4 is where things already become very high connected. But level 3, which was originally around the planet, connects to the intergalactic level in the ray of creation. So at that time, people could literally connect to other star belts, to other places in the universe, because there was a direct energy connection, a tuning fork between the atmosphere around the planet at that time and other places in the universe. And this is very interesting when you look at, Egyptian mummies and you look at their sarcophagi. Now, what they found out that in the sarcophagi, some of these Egyptians have put what is called color barcodes. And some of these color barcodes, they're very unique in their thickness and in their range, respond to the color frequencies that apparently come from certain star belts. Now, how did they know? How did they know? So originally, our planet, when it was in its maximum, in its golden age, in its paradise state, in its Arcadian condition, had all the less highly developed levels on the outside. And the finer levels of energy were on the inside. But because, that's an interesting thing, I need to find the paper if I can. Let's see. This is asking your patience because there's so many papers on this table and I might have lost a paper. If not, I will. Here it is. But here you got the Astral Light, 2020 after Christ. It's the time we live in today. Now, what happened is, you see, at the time that the planet was still in this high energy, all these giants, or this mix-up of genetics, of an original type of human, which was blue and little. They even found skeletons of very little human a couple of years ago in Indonesia, whole tribe, started to mix with the Egyptian genetic, and it started to create these giants, and cruelty started to appear. So what happened in this fine atmosphere? These giants started to attract energy levels that were on the outside of the planet, level 7, level 6, but mostly level 7. So all these lower levels of energy got drawn in. And it started to fill this very fine space, with much more physical and low energy. And as it went on, you could say that the electromagnetic atmosphere of our planet, before its time, before its cycle was over, started to fall apart. And it started to come below a certain level where that sun state, with the waters being up, could no longer be held, and the waters started to come down. Now that's the flood. And what is interesting, that when the flood happened, a lot of organic material came down with it as well, which explains certain areas on the world, like the Sahara, where there's a lot of sand. And it explains as well, that they found these layers, sediment layers, that apparently, one layer is 250 million years old, the next one 200 million years old, the next one. But there's trees that are petrified that go through all these layers. So even today, new scientists are thinking, our whole theory about sedimentation and how old the Earth is actually not fitting. So something has happened where a lot of stuff came down and sedimented very, very quickly. Now, as it did, this heavenly atmosphere, this golden age of man, broke completely down. And what was left was a planet that was disconnected from the sun. And you get all these writings, therefore, from the Egyptians that they feel they are imprisoned here. They cannot go back. It's cut off. And what is basically happening is that the atmosphere is left, starts to slowly become lesser and lesser and lesser. And it goes from the golden age to the silver age, to the bronze age, to the iron age of man, the Kali Yuga, what the Indians talk about. It's our time. And so it goes down. Now, as it goes down, there's other religions appearing. They're not what is called gold religions, they're silver religions. So that's a whole story for itself. But what happens as well is that the astral light of our planet changes. So where level 7 was on the outside, now it is around our planet. And then it's level 6, then level 5, then level 4, then level 3. And this explains why, you know, a lot of cultures like the Aztec, the Maya, they built their temples high on the mountains because higher up on the planet, the atmospheres are more clean. You know, so when you look at this, you could say, especially in the valleys, the lower places, the delta places of our planet, you know, there is this increasing electromagnetic fog, and it's a very red energy. Now, as we know, I said red is to do with Egypt, and you got a very high red. But as it broke down, you know, Egypt started to degenerate as well. And you know, Egypt, because it's to do with the diversification. You know, it's like Egypt was directly when it started to re-establish itself, and I come to that 5000 BC after the flood. It started to split up Egypt in two parts. And, you know, and that's a very interesting thing because that's what redshift does. It moves away from the core in diversification, whilst blue shift is multiplicity that tries to work together and tries to respond back to creation. So Egypt, what it did is that it started, as soon as it re-established itself again after the flood, it started to divide the kingdom of Egypt into two parts. And one is Lower Egypt, which is in a way the delta area, and that was the red crown, which is related to the head. And this is Upper Egypt. Sounds a bit confusing, but it's where the now starts. And this is the white crown of Egypt. Now, between these two, you know, kingdoms, you know, between red Egypt and white Egypt, there was a very definite marcation line. And what is very interesting, that if you look at Egypt, you know, that Egypt, you know, like in cycles, has been left and be reoccupied many times, just like civilizations build layers on layers on layers. Now, if you go back before the flood, you know, Egypt, the Egyptian thing was all over the planet, but Egypt had a very, very central significance, because, and I want to show you this, here you got the Nile. Now, if you look at the Nile, you see something very, very interesting. The Nile, here's the delta area, and that is what is called Lower Egypt. And here you got the Nile itself, and that is called Upper Egypt. So here you got what is called the head area, and this is what is called the spine area. Because why? The Egyptians used the area of the Nile, you know, as a kind of enlarged map of the human anatomy. And, you know, look at this. This is the head with its brain, which is the red crown of Egypt. And the spine here is relating to the Nile. Right? Now you see, the funny thing is, well, at this figure with his red brain, and we are in his compressed skull, and I come back later to that, because it's not always been like that. We have compressed hard skull with soft things inside, whilst our body is soft on the outside and hard inside. So this is our sun part that can develop. This is our planetary part, our organs. So the same thing in Egypt, you know. The red crown of Egypt, that's basically the governing system upon the white crown. Basically, this is the brain that can develop our head, and then we got an automatic brain in our spine, which has got to do with all the automatic functions and our instincts. So after the flood, although the atmosphere has become more and more polluted, and they already started to notice that before the flood. And then you come into the mysteries of the pyramid. But just around, I would say around 12,000 BC, when they started to, all these disasters started to happen, just before the flood, they started to already build pyramids. And the interesting thing is that when you look at the pyramids, they found out that there is an alignment between the pyramids of Gizeh and the star belt of Orion. And they can trace back that they are in such a way aligned to the star belt of Orion 10,000 years BC. So because of this, though, the pyramids are actually far older than what they tell us today. Now, what were the pyramids about? In a time when the atmosphere started to decrease, on the time that our planet was in the sun state, during the day it was fine because, it's like it was still sun-like. But when night started to become, the sun energies became lesser, the pyramids were basically, built as solar furnaces. They collected the heat, warmth, and the energy of the sun, and to spread that in the times the sun was less active into the atmosphere. And they tried to keep a certain high atmosphere. Now it's very interesting that when you look at the word pyramid, that in Greek it actually means fire in the middle. And it's interesting that they found in the pyramids these 4 gateways or tunnels, that are pointing at 4 star belts. And the one is the star belt of Leo, especially pointing at the star of Regulus. There comes the word royalty comes from. So that is a fire influence. On the opposite of it is the star belt of Aquarius, and that's relating to the element of air and the eagle. Then there's a crossover from the star belt of Taurus, a minor Orso, which is relating to the bull. It's an earth element. And this is, on the opposite, going to the star belt of Scorpio. And that's, the star belts of the snakes, or the reptiles, the dragons. And so the pyramid, was not only, gathering sun energy, it's also been trying to gather, you could say, cosmic influences. Now, all of this in a time that the planet was very high conductive, had a very, very strong influence. But because it's no longer conductive, it's far more difficult to be clairvoyant now than in the time of ancient Egypt. So if you look at Egypt, it's very interesting in the Egyptian art that they never show teeth in their statues, in their hieroglyphs, because the further back you go, especially to the early kingdoms, everything was clairvoyant and people didn't speak because speaking would rise up. It would be a more physical action and it would actually decrease the atmosphere. Interesting as well, if you go to the early kingdoms, you see that the thumbs of the Egyptians were far longer than ours today. So fingers had an equal length and the thumb was as long as our finger. That had 3 parts. Now, couldn't they depict just a normal human hand? Or was it actually another genetic? And are we, and that's the question, are we in fact, another species, a mix-up? And was it that they came from a higher place, but they had not the same freedom as humans to develop? And so Egypt is an enormous mystery. And the whole story about the mix-up of genetics, the flood, and it is so interesting as well, in all this story it talks about Noah, or whoever is called Nama, or whatever other names they got in these different cultures, is sending out a raven, a blackbird, and he can't find land. And then in the end, it's a white dove, or a white bird, or, it's something white that gets sent out and reports back there's land. Now, in the occult, the colors black and white, they relate to magnetism, which is black, and electricity, which is white. And it is very interesting, if you change these colors, you can see it in the Tower of Pisa. In the Tower of Pisa, the whole architecture is white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black. So you go electrical, magnetic, electrical, magnetic, electrical, magnetic, electrical, magnetic, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, which basically means nothing of an energy can anchor on it. That's why prison costumes are in that way. Black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, because they don't want prisoners in prison to become, portals for evil. So you put them into dresses that are white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black. Like the zebra, when you have to cross the road, white, black, white, black, white, black. It's magnetic, electric, magnetic, electric, magnetic, electric. Daytime, nighttime, daytime, nighttime. So the colors of ancient Egypt, they were red and white based in black. And therefore you see that color combination of black, white, and red. You see that a lot coming back into Freemasonry. You see that coming back also with the Nazis as an example, where you see the color black, red and white turning up in their flags, in their uniforms, in their costumes. And all of that is relating back to Egypt and the knowledge of ancient Egypt. But it is degenerated. And Egypt, because it is redshift and it goes this way, Egypt has always been pyramidical, hierarchical. It's a hierarchical structure. And Egypt was therefore always dividing itself, like the two lands, into classes. It was always an upper class and a lower class. They didn't mix. In the cities of ancient Egypt, there was often a north gate, a south gate, a west gate, and an east gate. In the north lived the priests. In the east, the kings. In the south, the traders, the writers, and some of the craftsmen. And in the west, in the red end of the city, lived the farmers. These classes didn't mix. That's where in Hinduism, the caste system, with the 4 classes and the 5th classes, which are the pariahs, comes out of Egypt. And so the Egyptian heritage, which is based in the head, which is redshift, which is based in the brain, it hasn't got the same empathy and feeling as the more human part. And so, but this new human mix-up, of which we are part, basically what we are 1/3 red, 1/3 Egyptian, 2/3 blue. But because of the degeneration of the world today, we're living in this red-hot atmosphere, this degenerated Egypt, with the misuse of power, where money, sex, and power rule the world. What it basically is saying, that a lot of us are 3/3 red. And the only thing it turns about is making money, ambition, one's ego. Now, the strange thing is that, what happened at a certain point is that, when you look at these class systems before the flood, and then they had a function, because then it was highly functional. But after the flood, it becomes basically class distinctive. And one class starts to rule the other. And what also happens at a certain time, therefore you get the whole thing with bloodlines. And the royalty starts to form bloodlines. And you get caste differences. And you get an increasing difference between the rich and the poor, which it was like in Egypt as well. At the time of 5000 BC, when it got re-established again, and around the old kingdoms, 3100 BC, with Namar and some of these kings. You had the elite, and then you had the great masses. And that is still something we suffer in the world today. It's part of the old paradigm. It's something we try to break out from. Now, the interesting thing is that, you see, I put up this diagram here. So Egypt, there's redshift. It's developed out of the basket of creation, but it is facing towards the physical realms. And therefore, it's always hierarchical. But our blue red planet is actually trying to combine the multiplicity of life and influence and bring it back to creation. So the story of, creation, which was feminine, the heart creating God, gets repeated in the Bible. But what it is then, it's that it is red first, Adam, and out of Adam, Eve gets created. After the establishment of the automatic ray of creation, the feminine ray, which can respond back, is created. Now, as you see, our planet is not triangular red, it's actually a blue place. And it's a cross, and therefore you see, the first, what we call not gold religions, but the silver religions, it's Christianity. It's the cross. And the cross is also, or the earth, is a symbol of the heart. So suddenly it's no longer the head and the brain that is in control. Now it's the heart. And so in Christianity, we're still in a masculine epoch. It's the first symptoms of something more feminine appearing. And we start to see, things like compassion, especially, you look at Rome, which was red, completely red in its uniform, in its administration, in its cruelty, in its hierarchy. Yeah, and in that time, you get Christianity and something of the heart is born, humanity, compassion. So there's something else is starting up. Now, the amazing thing about it is that, you see, we're living in a time where we are coming out of this old paradigm. We're coming out of a masculine epoch, a red-governed epoch, a gold epoch, and we're entering into a next time. And it is not masculine, it is feminine. It's moving from a gold frequency that is like nighttime and holds things and binds things together, to a silver time where everything is moving quick, where it is outward, where it's about freedom, the individual, the unicity of each human. We're in this shift. But as we are in this shift, then we need to leave the luggage of the past and be open to the future. Now, we need to therefore move away from that male dominance that is also dominating our left part of our brain and come more into balance and make a balance between the masculine and the feminine. And so I said it to Lucas and Laura, in the other talk I did earlier today, scientists found out a great, amazing fact. And, we think our brain is powerful, but, they can put these, these, could say wires on our brain. What is they called? I forgot the name. Anyway, they can measure brain waves with it. And they can also measure how powerful the brain is. Now, they started to do the same thing with the heart, and surprisingly enough, it seems that the heart is 60 times as strong in radiation as our brain. Now, this is marvelous, because basically what it says, if I start to not just connect to my brain, you look at our whole world and our way of education, it's all brain, 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 brain. And where actually children should come on schools where it is first the learning of the heart. But if we connect more to our heart, it's actually got a 60 times as strong radiation as our brain. And it makes me think of Buddha, who said, if you got 50 Buddhas on the world, they could change the world. Now, the question is, what are these heart qualities? And compassion, love, understanding, forgiveness, all these kind of things. And let's imagine that in a time where we are having this great opposition between this strong moon and this cosmic rays, these two polarizing influence, it might be that the bridge into the future has very much to do with the development of these human qualities. As a first, to balance out history and to balance out Egypt in us and to come back more to our 2/3 blue human genetic that was originally very kind. So that might be the first step. And then there's another thing, in that balancing out, at the moment it seems that, there's not just a red shift or a blue shift, there's something that is like a neutral shift. And something in, the galaxy, there's a doorway open that is not to do with this old tick-tock between the planet and the sun, where but something else is coming from a different place in the universe that is entirely new. And if that's the case, there's developments possible with the human race that maybe have never been possible before. But the question is, can we be open to it? Now, I do expect in the coming time the old epoch to run out. And as it does, it will do it, with a lot of noise, like fireworks in the end of the year. And it's very strange, because if you go from one epoch to another, in this interim of time, one epoch running out and the other one starting, there's this time in between. And it's a bit like, like the spectrum, it's also, because our planet is governed by a rainbow structure. So let's say it's moving, from violet, which is when this new epoch started, which starts with a high energy, and it's the promise of genetic change. But as time goes on, it wants to embody itself. And I think we are somewhere in the middle of that transition. We are in the time of the lungs. We are in the time of lung diseases. But we're moving in the time of the yellow. And what I expect for the years to come is, an incredible growth of, as the old paradigm and epoch is running out, of emotional instability. That's the first. Because the physical holding patterns of the past are falling away. And that's already visible. You see an increase of emotional problems all over the world. In Japan, the suicide rate at the moment under young women is higher than the people died of corona. But they died because of corona. They died because of lockdown, because of losing their jobs. I know in Holland there's figures of between the age of 18 and 24, 50% of the youth is depressed. And many are antidepressant. I know from Copenhagen here, if you go to the psychiatric departments of Bispebjerg, it's a hospital in Copenhagen. There's an increase in anorexia, there's an increase in OCD, there's an increase again in depression. All over the world, suicide levels go up, emotional diseases. So how not become part of that? So I think in this time we need to be very careful, to not go into our lower emotions. Basically, why? Because if you have an emotional outburst, it's a very forceful, sun level energy. It's so volatile that it can actually burn holes in your aura. And it makes you more susceptible for diseases. And then there's also, you think about this with the corona, you think, okay, how would you best battle corona? Now we're all just looking at it in a physical way, get a vaccine, keep your mask on. On the other hand, when you go back to the 30s in the last century, they knew if you want to treat people that have infections, virus infections, expose them to ultraviolet light, sunlight. Let them eat vitamin C, get them out. Don't lock them up in an apartment. Don't let them hold a mask so they can breathe in the same bacteria all over again. And so many of the measurements are so much based in the physical, and you wonder why. Why is this happening? Where's common sense gone to? And it's all the time preaching fear. We have to be afraid. We have to keep distance. It's not reaching out into our humanity. We become afraid of other people. We train our children, and imprint them, with fear. Now, children, they got what is called, they learn in many ways, but one of the parts they learn through is the amygdala. It's a gland in our brain, which is basically the fight and flight center. They also discovered that the fight and flight center, is not just reacting to fear, it's also making connections with other people. And for children, especially babies, this is facial expression. When babies don't see facial expressions, or young children, it basically is inhibiting their social engagement later in life with other people. So we wonder, what's going on? And what is the longer term effect? And yes, if there is something like a corona, but why has there not been done any research into the more electromagnetic realms? Why is it that there are so many other studies that do appear get taken off the internet? We don't hear about them. It's all part of an old paradigm that's dying out. Now, after the emotional phase, you will come into the orange, and orange is a color of migration. So, and hunger. So, economics breakdown. Is that the way we are? Are we ending? Here in West Europe, America, with hunger. Yeah, moving tribes, people seeking food, ending up in the red, which is war, the final destruction. Now, that's one way. But we can look at that and become depressed. And we can try to fight against it. And when you fight against something, you have to be very careful that you don't become part of the problem if you base all your energy on that. You have to base yourself, that's what I think, is something else that is open for the future, and which is now coming through this cosmic rays, and be open to it. And it's unknown. And one of the things it is almost saying, you have to be neutral. You have to be colorless, because if it comes with a specific new frequency, and I'm colored, I can only bias it away. I'm not open to its message. So these new times are also asking, I think, for ourselves to not go in polarization. Being careful of judgment, not going into right and wrong, this or that, but reserve a place in ourselves that is quiet enough to listen to something else. Now, what's already happening, and that's been going on also for decennia. When I was young, I'm still young, but in the 70s, it's like if you spoke about the aura, you were looked at very strange. Today, it's the aura is common bread, and so there's been a development where more and more people become open to something else that is not just based in the old paradigm in chemistry and physics. And I think, what happens if we're open, all kinds of equipment can switch on in us. Our pineal gland can get activated, And as it does, it can start to radiate, and we develop halos, we develop electrical wings, ESP, all kinds of stuff that has been dormant equipment in most people for thousands of years. Now, I think that's the promise of a new world. And a new world that has never been seen before. And so if we're looking at, and that is coming to this close down, at this fantastic day starting tomorrow, this winter solstice, we're not just looking at a solstice, we're not just looking at, a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, we're not just looking, at an old paradigm and a new paradigm, and we're not just looking at cosmic rays now coming in. We're looking at a combination of this and much more. We're literally entering into what I think is a very promising and hopeful time for those that reserve a place inside themselves to be open to it. So if I would have one message, stay anchored in sanity, be careful for emotional outbursts, judgments, keep yourself neutral, don't try to fix things in a box, keep open, and dare to stay in the unknown. And rather a little thing going up than a big thing coming down. And I think, with that, I'm just having a look at Lucas and Lauge, coming to the end, and maybe also to, the period where people can start to ask some questions. So, yeah.
Wow, this was really amazing, Mark. This was quite mind-blowing, and you can really do an incredible lecture, and I know that you have so much information to share. Actually, today, Mark and I did a 2-hour-long, really explosive and in-depth show with him, where I asked him a lot of questions about all of his knowledge. And I think we can do actually several shows with Mark in the future. And this was so exciting to do it like this, giving you my seat here, and you have so much information, and this is really great. And we also got some great questions from the audience here. And Mark, we would like to start with some of them. We've selected some, and I will just go through some of them. So we will, so, you know, it doesn't have, you don't have to, you know, go in long explanations. Let's see how many questions we can actually get in here. There's somebody asking, do you think that this is a heavenly battle between Jupiter, Jesus, and Saturn, Satan?
Well, I would not relate, you know, Saturn the planet to Satan. But if you say, you look, you know, at influences, you know, in one way you could say yes. It's like, you know, the thing is, it is, you know, I find it very interesting. We can look at people and say, well, you know, who is evil, who's not evil? That's a very dangerous thing to do. But, you know, it's because it's not people, it is what is getting into people. It's always influence that's getting into people. And in the analogy, you know, we can connect to moon influences, to sun influences. We can connect to anger and hate, or we can connect to love and compassion. And that choice we've got. And I think this polarization that's going on tomorrow, where Saturn does stand, in that sense, for the old paradigm, you know, for what has to go. And Jupiter, it's the new savior, you know, the sign of a new sun, you know, and they coming together, and it's almost like they looking each other for a last time in the eyes before it separates. And I think this is a time of making your mind up. What do you want to be possessed by? And in a time of fear and panic, people can very easily go, as I see it, into self-preservation. Me. It's all about me. But maybe exactly in this time, it is the different way around. Yeah. So that's one answer on it.
Great. And actually, we have a follow-up question from somebody else asking, Saturn was once seen as the sun in the Roman times.
Yes.
Saturn worship. But why Saturn? Why did people, how did people even know about Saturn back then?
Wow, amazing question. Well, you know, I can't go too long in it, but this all relates again to solar mechanics. And, you know, our planets have not always been, you know, in the same orbit around the sun as they have today. You know, you got this Velikovsky, you know, this Russian scientist that already wrote about Venus being closer to the planet. Now, you look as an example at the planet Mars, and you even see its sign, you know, this masculine sign. It's a red planet. Now, what I found now is that there are, you know, there have been canals of water on Mars. There's apparently even been life on Mars, but Mars has almost given it away. You know, same thing with Saturn. You know, Saturn used to be a bit like Jupiter, the leading planet. You know, but it got fixed in its development. It's also the sixth planet, which is interesting. And 6 is the number of fix. So it got fixed in its development. And, you know, Saturn or Kronos, you know, first being the upper leading planet, became the god of the underworld. Now, the same story you see in Egypt. You know, you see Osiris, battling, you know, with Set, his brother, and he gets dismembered in many parts, and then Isis puts them together, and she makes love with him, and they get a son Horus. Now, Osiris becomes the underworld. It's almost like it's the old sun. Yeah, it's the old sun that now becomes the underworld. And so it's our planet that was a sun that now becomes the underworld. And a new sun is rising. Now, who's the new sun? It's Horus. And Horus, like Odin, is the one-eyed god. Now, what's the one eye? It's this here. It's the third eye. That's which is basically saying, if your pineal gland gets active, and you connect to the universe, you know, your pineal gland starts to work, but thereby also your third eye. And you know it's working when it starts to pulse. And you get this dent in your head. You know, people that because the cranium here will be melted, it will be soft. And so, back to Saturn, Kronos, you know, Osiris, you know, it used to have a leading role. Now it's become the god of agriculture. Now it's become the god of the underworld, Hades. Yeah. And so, what is it telling about? Yeah, just little inroads. There's so much more to tell about it, but I think there's so many questions, so keep it short. But thanks.
We have another one directly from the chat here, and who's asking, the physical matrix that we live in, this Earth reality has been created by the collective consciousness. Is it only one of many dimensional realms that different entities or beings live within?
Yeah, obviously, because things live on different levels of energy. So the physical realm, you know, it's like there's a whole other realm that if we are not elevated towards those levels, that we don't see. Now, if a person, you know, it's a simple example, you know, it's like at the moment a person starts to, as an example, move away from just a physical moon level and comes more in contact with the planet, which is called an electromagnetic atmosphere. One of the first things they start to see, for example, is an etheric part of the aura. And they start also to see what is called fairy life, elemental life, you know, around, you know, the springs, the trees, the rivers, you know. And that was, you know, the holy springs, you know, even if you go to the Nordic mythology or in other places of the world, you know, where people would gather because of healing essences. Now that's all on the level of planet. But in the astral light of our planet is higher levels. There's angelic structures. And so if you go levels up, there's you know, angels on this level, and there's even higher angels, archangels, all kinds of beings now that are living within the confinements of our planet, but are basically, you know, so electrically based that in our current state we can't see it any longer, but it can be trained, and it can switch on as soon as a person starts to do their personal development. Like I always say, you know, you can go on the course for clairvoyance. But clairvoyance will really switch on when you do personal development. It comes with it. And so, yeah.
So there's a lady saying we are the 99%. And then Jack is saying, is the so-called Illuminati or the 1% still all powerful and as powerful as they have been for centuries, really? Or are they being taken down at the moment?
Well, it's a good question. You know, it's like, I don't know the Illuminati, I don't know their names, but it is, you know, I know, you know, from, if you look at, you know, how things work, you know, it will be a circle of 12 that rule the world, you know, and like Jesus had 12 apostles. And all of that is related back to natural laws and, you know, masonry. So there will be 12 people. Now, you know, are they highly connected? Would they call high knowledge? But it is high knowledge that gets used in a degenerated atmosphere. And I don't think this is sustainable. You know, it works basically by divide and rule, you know, control, suppression, if there is something like that. And so, no, I don't think, you know, they will have esoteric knowledge, no doubt. If they, I don't know who they are, they will have it. But they have not the connection to the future. And so in that sense, they're waning in power. But everything that wanes in power is struggling to survive. So I think this is, you know, it's the end days. And that's why everything becomes more and more transparent as well.
Great. So another guy is asking, is this so-called spiritual war really a war inside each of us that is reflected in our outer world?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think, you know, that the transformation, that if you look in the old paradigm, you know, you had a ruling elite, you know, kings and queens, pharaohs, whatever you call it. And then you had the masters that were basically communal tribal. I think we're moving into a time, and we have been for quite some centuries, with increasing individualism. And I think this time is challenging us all, make up your own mind, think for yourself, and dare to think free out of the box. Research things yourself. Can I have the question one more time? It's like it was a good question.
Okay, let me just go.
Yeah.
Now you're putting me on the spot here.
Yes.
Because now I have to go back and see where that was. Where was that? Okay, I lost it again, I think, that question. But it was something about whether or not it is reflected in our outer world, if this is a spiritual world inside of us. Yeah, here it is. Is it really a war inside each of us that is reflected in our outer world?
That's fine. Well, I think, it's like, as we get exposed to higher cosmic influences, it will also start to reflect on all those parts in us that are unfortunate. Because, when you're elevated in a higher energy, you can also start to better see what is not working. Now, we can either identify ourselves with all that mess, and then we will get down the drain, or we can take a neutral position on distance to it and look at it and say, well, can I let go of some of these things that now no longer work? Because they are of the past. They are part of an old paradigm. They're part of an old culture. I've been born in that culture. It's not my fault, but do I want to take this on into the future?
All right. So another lady is asking, some people believe that the world will come to an end on December the 21st, 2021. That's tomorrow. In fact, we are here on Central European time in Denmark, and it's now. So I really hope that we'll get to Christmas and the New Year so we can get to work and change everything. But this lady's saying that a lot of people actually do believe it, and we've been hearing about these, end of the world prophecies for so many years. So she's asking, what do you feel about such prophecies, end of the world prophecies that some people fear and have done for a long time? Huh? I guess that's what she says.
Yeah. Well, I think, I can understand it. And I used to be far more dramatic, in the 2000s there was the Y2K. And I thought actually it would happen. So with some friends, I was somewhere in the countryside with my rice bags and my survival kit. And as the 1st of January came, the computers were still running on. And then you got 2012, the Mayan calendar, it's going to end the world. But I think, it's like these things don't work from one day to another. Like seasons, it doesn't become spring from one day to another. There's always a period of transference. There's an interim between one thing and the other. And in that interim in which we are now, certain things are slowly disappearing and other things are coming in. And certain things gain in strength, other things weaken. So not in that sense an end of the world. No, I don't think that. But I think, that there is signals that can put the stop to something, but it will take time for that to physically embody. So that's the idea of clairvoyance. You pick it up and 2 days later it physically happens because it's already happened in the electrical worlds. And so things dying, but not abrupt. Yes.
So Diane is asking, how do you expect this new paradigm to materialize itself in practice?
Is this the Diane Vincent?
I do believe so, yeah.
Okay. Hi Diane, if it's Diane. Can you repeat the question one more time?
How do you expect this new paradigm to materialize itself in practice?
Oh, what a beautiful question. Well, I think, it's like, when you look at government today, it's like, I think that's an interesting thing. Government is based in politics, and it's like interesting. We're talking white shift, of a red shift, blue shift. You got the red bloc, you got the blue bloc. and they're polarized against each other. And you know, it's not like they need to work together, but they often don't. You know, they're opposing each other. That's the Egyptian thing. It's like it's that separation from each other. It's that power war. And while I think true politics is, well, we're all different, but we have to work together. That's what our planet is in a way promising. But in order to do so, you can't just say, you know, let's go from red shift to blue shift. Let's go from Egypt to and the head and the brain to the heart. You know, where we're all the same and we all got the same rights, because, you know, let's say if I'm a big criminal and I have the same voting rights as Lucas, who's a developed angel, it doesn't make sense. And so somehow I envision, you know, in that sense, you know, not like a government that is dictatorship, but a movement of people that, you know, recognizes, you know, when future influences are coming in, and that can happen one day with this person or one day with that person. It's not in that sense personal. Who can be open? Who can receive the message? Now, that, if there's something like that possible, is asking, you know, for people to put aside their ego. Because what now? If you've been in university for 20 years and your title is professor, and, you know, you've written so many books, and suddenly your neighbor, Fru Jensen, you know, and she's never done anything like that study, suddenly having the clairvoyant pickups and developing charisma, and people coming to her and knock on the door, and they don't listen to you any longer, they listen to Fru Jensen. Now that's very interesting. So I think we're not there. There's an interim time needed, but I think we somewhere need, like in scientific research, you know, we need independent people, not bound up with, you know, money and power, hierarchy. We need somehow a wise elders of the tribe group, you know, that can be in this interim, that cannot be bought by industry, cannot be bought by finances, that represent humane qualities, and that are almost like a council of advice, you know, and that will also perhaps have a veto right when politicians, you know, are running out of hand.
So, Haney B Creations, I hope I say that right, is saying, maybe we're all living in a dream and therefore there's no end.
Well, I would say to this person, it's a nice question, but I say friendly. You go into the fridge, you take out a potato, you boil it, and you put it on your cheek. And I think the dream will be over. I think we're living in a very real world in that sense. Yeah, but I don't think that's what the person means. So I would like to have the question one more time.
Maybe we're all living in a dream and therefore it is all... I should always stay with that question every time, huh? Mm-hmm. Not go on to the next. And therefore there's no end. Maybe we're all living in a dream and therefore there's no end.
Yeah.
It's a dream state illusion, huh?
Right.
Illusionary existence.
Okay. Well, yeah, in one way, I think, you know, lots of what we're in, you know, the way we've grown up is in that sense a dream state, but maybe not a nice dream, but a nightmare because of the lower electrics, you know, that are on our planet. You know, 5G is not going to make it better. It's going to create a microwave radiation around the planet, and it will cut us off from, like the Aboriginals say, the real dream time. You know, again, referring back to a time of the human race where everything was different. And so I think we're dreaming on what level?
Well, if this whole thing is a dream, then certainly this whole Corona madness is a nightmare. So let's please wake up soon, huh?
Well, that's right.
So Kevin is asking, I don't believe in strings. I'm a skeptic on quantum anything. Your thoughts on that? He says, I don't believe in a multiverse. This is how the question is. Do you understand this?
No, I don't know completely. What it sounds to me is that, you know, well, now I find it a very difficult question because I He would need to specify that more.
He says he's a skeptic on quantum anything that has to do with quantum. He doesn't believe in strings. He says he doesn't believe in a multiverse. But what are your thoughts on that? It doesn't have to be a long answer if you have a short one for that.
No, I find it, it's basically saying, I don't believe in God creation. I don't, he doesn't believe in there's more to life. Is that what he's saying? Or he doesn't believe in certain theories, quantum-like theories, or there being more worlds?
Well, for once, these are not my questions, so yes. I can't read people's minds. No, but I'm just hoping that I'm just trying to see if you can, how many of them you can answer.
Yeah. So I would say to this one, it's like, it's like with all respect, I would need to have more background on the question. What he says.
Okay. So Bob K is asking, what can we do in our own life and experience to live a happy and full life?
Well, that's a very interesting question. That's a good question. It's obviously an answer with, I think, incredible multiple answers. But, I think, like people, they discover this scientific theory, people that have a value for the miracle of life live longer. So there's certain qualities, I think, that give us vitamins, that inspire us. If I just do everything for myself, the end of it is hell, it's misery. But at the moment I turn towards the greater good and I start to save a greater purpose than just myself, life becomes much more miraculous. So I think it's, there's many overlays in that question. So it did, but I do think that it's like that transition from head to heart, to embrace those feminine qualities that are so needed in this world today.
So now Kevin is writing in the chat that he's, of course, talking about string theory and quantum mechanics.
Right. Okay. And he doesn't believe in that.
Well, that's what he means. Yeah.
You got waves and the wave theory, and you got quantum physics, and both are, like the law of two. It's, they're two expressions of one thing. And something gets charged up like a particle, and suddenly it can jump into another energy level. That's been proven with many things. It's like take a ruby stone, it gets lighted up during the day, and in the night it starts to release fluorescent light. It jumps into another octave. It's part of understanding quantum physics. Also the idea of quantum physics, where particles that have met in resonance with each other, because they can exchange communication with each other through space and time. Well, that might be theory for some, but I know, from experience, that I can connect to people, on the other side of the planet, and I can pick up what they feel and think, and the other way around if they're open. And so it's where you want to go with it, what your experiences are, what your adding ups are, and yeah.
So we can still take a few more questions. A lady, or maybe it's a guy, is writing here, the UN is being run by globalists. What are your thoughts on climate change and depopulation, eugenics?
Well, that's a very good question. It's like, it's like, I have to be very careful because, it's like, again, it's only theories, like in the sense of how far can we go to prove things. We can add up certain things from the things we see in the actions that are taken around us. That's where I take my positions. And obviously I can weave things together, like, you follow the stream of money. Where does it go? Is there a leading club of people in the world? Yes, there is. Is there a certain kind of elite? Yes, there is. Do they have depopulation plans? Well, in Holland, the Bilderberg Group was meeting already in 2012, and they were describing that in 2020 there would only be 20% left of the world population. It came out in the newspapers. So, you know, the thing is, I haven't met the people personally. It might be there, and even if it's on the go, you know, it's like I can only measure it on their actions. But a wise man to me said once, you know, it's like, and it's become more and more because, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the screens.
But I'll jump in with my own thing. Do you, just a short answer, do you believe that climate change is actually, that this danger of that the climate is in danger and the world is practically going under? Do you believe that this is real science?
And no, I think it is very incomplete because I think a lot of universal mechanisms are not understood into it. And you know, so because let's say that our planet is changing and that the atmosphere are actually becoming warmer because it will pushes the water into another circumstance. That might be part of it. And because of more powerful rays from the cosmic comes in, it will influence the electromagnetic atmosphere of our planet, which is energy. And therefore, that can also, of course, have all kinds of effects we just don't know about. And so I'm very prone to keep things open, you know, and not to become too definite in these times, because it can very quickly close the box for other perceptions. And I think knowings come basically from a different place, you know, where you suddenly, you know something to be, because you connect to it. You connect to the intelligence of it. And that's different than brain. You know, so brain knowledge is just the head that can things out. But I think, you know, there's another kind of intelligence that we need to tap into in these times. And so one part I could say, yeah. Another part in me says, well, keep it open, you know, and be careful to not get lost into it too much, because if you connect to it and you fight against it, you become, like the saying, you know, if you start to hunt the witches, don't be careful you don't become a witch yourself. You see what I'm saying? So I base myself in that openness to something else and not to be too definite on things.
But the UN Agenda 21 and UN Agenda 2030, the Limits to Growth plan, is talking, of course, about the climate change agenda. And this is also what we've seen been rolled out massively over the past few years. And well, every 10 years, they have a huge climate scare, right? But then moving on to something completely different. There is a viewer here called, this is a really amazing name, Messiah Muhammad.
Wow.
Now that is quite a name. Who says, is sex or sexual energy necessarily a high vibration or a low vibration thing?
Well, you know, it's like, that's a very good question. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, sex is basically procreation. And, you know, so you can have sex on many levels. You can have physical sex, you know, which is basically a short union. You get your orgasm and that's it. But you can also have sex with your mind, with the universe. And that's where you mix with another intelligence. And in that virtualization, in that crossover, new birth, you know, arises, which is, new thoughts.
So it could actually be both high energy, high frequency, yes, and also low frequency, depending on how you have that. Have sex.
And even exactly, you can have physical sex, which you could show is from the physical order, but you can have it in many ways. You can have it full of love, care. It's what you put into it as well. You know, so I think there's many. You've got high sex and low sex. We've got a lower sexual center, our physical sexual center. Our higher sexual center is not based there. It's basically, you know, in our mind. You know, where we are able to connect and become procreators. Now that's at the level, if we go back to the ray of creation, at the level of stars, that's where the level of green, where we become co-creators. Absolutely.
Okay, so here's a question, and I think this actually demands a very short answer from you. I think you can answer this very briefly. Do you think that the Matrix movies were in fact documentaries?
Well, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think it's a great question, you know, with the red pill and the blue pill. You know, it's like, I can't remember, but I think the red pill brought you back to the world of industry, and I can't remember how it was, and the blue pill kept you into reality. But I think it is talking about these two worlds, of the brain and the heart, of the blue shift and the red shift. And I think many films, are either engineered, to program the human mind and brain, with the brainwashing effect, and some others, they basically pick up things that are not from a deeper reality level. And yeah.
So, of course, we had several questions of this nature. What are your thoughts on flat Earth theory? Several people say that we are not living on a spinning ball.
Well, out from an understanding from the universal laws, it doesn't make sense, because you see round shapes are feminine and lines or flat angles are masculine. So this principle is masculine, transfers energy from one point to another. And circles or cycles are feminine. Now, if it would be a flat Earth, we would call it Mother Earth, we would call it Father Earth. And you see, our planet is receiving the light of the sun, and that's a masculine frequency, these beams, because they come in beams. It's transmission, that's masculine. And circles are feminine. And as it receives the light of the sun, it can transform it and become a nourishment to the growth of all kinds of life. So our planet is feminine, it will be flat. So I can't see that, unless the planet must have been in a very different state. But that's fantasy to me.
Some researchers say that it's both, that it can actually be both, depending on your state of awareness or how you see it, and everything is dualistic and the polarity, yeah. and there is
yes,
two of everything.
Well, but then again, it's level of perception, because it's like, if I look at a color, let's say I've got two colors here, let's use this. It's the color red and it is the color blue. Now it's flat on paper, but we know that the color red is approaching and the color blue is retreating. The color red is heating, blue is cooling. And so, although it's on a flat piece of paper, they do have a dimensional effect. Now, in the physical world, we call it a 3D effect. The planet is round. And that's very interesting. Now, but on another level of perception, it changes. Now, I'll give you a little example on this one. It's very interesting. You take your finger, if you're sitting on the camera, you take your finger and you start to turn your finger like this with the clock. Yeah? You look at it with the clock. Now, as you move it downward on the level of your eyes, what do you see? It's that circle that you saw becomes a line. And if you go down, that circle suddenly becomes anti-clockwise. Yeah? So it changes clockwise here. This is your equator, your horizon, and here becomes anti-clockwise. It's change of perception. So yeah.
So please explain the significance of the Schumann resonance at this point in time, connected with the 21st of September Saturn and Jupiter alignment, if any.
Hoo-ha. Well, the Schumann resonance, I know a bit about it, but it's the basic back resonance, the natural resonance of our planet. Yeah, and so how is that relating to this shift? Well, our planet is, it's got an electromagnetic field, and in there are many different frequencies. So if you've got a shift of heavenly bodies like Saturn and Jupiter. They influence that electromagnetic field. They also influence human resonances. It will. It's and so I don't know what to say about it actually.
Mm-hmm.
No.
So is it against universal and natural law principles what the dark forces behind the governments of the world has done, orchestrating this COVID crisis? Someone asks.
Okay, I want to have that one more time. Can you ask?
Okay, I'll see if I can read it here. Is it against universal and natural law principles what these dark forces behind the governments of the world have done orchestrating the COVID crisis? Assuming, of course, they've orchestrated the COVID crisis.
Yeah, well,
we've talked a lot about this show, devoting the whole year to talking about this.
Well, the universal laws are the universal laws, and that means they won't change, till the end of time, which is basically.
So can they be held? Can they be held responsible for doing this under natural law and universal principles?
Well, you would say basically, if you commit a crime against humanity, you also commit crimes against creation and God, because the intention of God and creation is to for the human to develop. So it basically is saying it's the three options of life, what you connect to, and all of this, if it's dark, it's connecting to moon level stuff. Now, if that's the energy you collect into your life, after you're dead and your aura falls and breaks apart, all energy goes back to the source of its rising. So if you are connecting to moon level influences that are very low, basically you become a crystal in the moon. You don't go anywhere. If you connect to planetary influences, you reincarnate. You connect to things outside of the planet, higher up, you come into the levels of immortality. That's the promise of all religion. So, you can be connected to the dark forces in this life. But where do you go? It's hell. Now, what was hell in the Greek underworld? It was basically a place where nothing lives. So, yeah.
Okay, so we'll take two more questions and then we'll end. When can we expect the coronavirus crisis to end? Yes, we would all very much like to hear that. What do the stars or the numbers say about that? Someone is asking.
Wow. Well, I think, where, like I said, I think we're on a kind of green period in the spectrum. And, it's like, the first signal for, this new epoch started to come in somewhere in the 90s, and then it did indigo, then it violet, and then the indigo children, it went to a kind of blue period, green. I think this could take many years. Literally, it can take many years. And, if you think about a grand solar minimum extending from 2020 to 2053, with the corona holes, portals for cosmic rays that can bring in viruses, we can have all kinds of virus mutations. And then you can ask, is coronavirus, is it coming from the universe or is it man-made? And even if it's man-made, it's like cosmic influences, because it's high force, you could have constant mutation. So how long does it go on? And I think it's also depending, about the state of the human race. It's like, I think the more we develop, or the better energies we can attract, the more intact we can stay, the more it boosts our immune systems. And so I think there's many, it is not, I don't have a definite on that.
Okay, so we'll take the last question from our viewers here tonight. Are we not here on Earth to find and to develop our own inner freedom and sovereignty?
Well, it's a good question, because if you think about this redshift, that's automatic. Now, that's a bit like a child that learns from his parents, and then you get puberty and you start to develop your own mind, and freedom comes into the picture. But what is freedom serving? And that I find a very interesting question, because if you want to be in service to something higher, you use freedom to be able to connect to certain things, and then you give up your freedom or parts of your freedom to be in service to something else. So, as an example, you choose to become a parent. Now, and if you got a child, you got a contract. Part of your freedom is gone. So I think, a freedom, a sovereignty, people talk very much, I need to become my own individual and all those kind of things. And I think big part of it is that's part, but it's a journey towards more than just that. Yeah, like freedom goes with responsibility. As I see it, you can't have one without the other. Otherwise it becomes loose. So, there's much more to say about it. So I have to, because of time, I have to shortcut it. It's a very good question, and I think it's leading into many things. So I'm sorry if I have to cut it up, but...
All right,
yes.
so tomorrow is the 21st of December, and it's a very special day. We've been hearing about it all year. People actually even say that we are in 2012, actually, that this is what they talked about in 2012 was going to happen, and this is now because of the timeline or a time difference there, and we can do a whole show on that as well. But tomorrow, Mark, just before we say goodbye to you, there will be this international, collective meditation tomorrow going on. So your final thoughts for the audience here about tomorrow, if we can all do something, if this energy and frequency can help the human race raise their frequency or vibration. We all want to do what we can. Mark.
Well, wow. Lucas, that was the most complicated question of all. It's a very good question. I think I tried to touch upon some of these things during this, and going a little bit back to the beginning of the show, it's like, this is just a great advice, but if you got the time and you can get out at night, into a forest nearby, and experience the force coming in, see that, if you, it might switch on your clairvoyance and your sight, your electrical vision. You might actually see the colored balls and be in the grace of something much finer. And I think therefore, it's, if we are in a new time and it's an unknown time, I think it's not the time of action. It's like, it's not to say that you can't do action, but I think there's a place in us that needs to be reserved to be open to something else long enough so it can go from our unconscious into our semi-conscious and our conscious. I think we need to be in a place of being a newborn baby, innocent, not knowing, looking at life with bright new open eyes, and I think we can do that, and there's a lot to be found in that.
Okay. Well, Mark STOLK, it's been really amazing to do this with you, and I must say it's wonderful. You've done an absolutely fascinating and incredibly well-informed and really good presentation here today. It's been great to do this on our channel, and we loved having you on as a guest presenter. So thank you so much for your efforts and everything you've done. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Mark. Mark STOLK.
Lucas, Lauge, just to say thank you very much for the invitation, and I enjoyed your company thoroughly, and also thanks to all the watchers, and I wish you a very good winter solstice.
Great. And you can also look forward to an in-depth hard talk 2-hour-long Age of Truth TV show with Mark and myself, where we go in depth and talk about this, which will come out later on our channel. We have many shows coming up soon. Also a very interesting New Year's Eve show that we're looking so much forward to do, and I hope you will watch that with us on New Year's Day. And hopefully there will be other shows out before that. We have a lot lined up already. Unfortunately, we are also facing a lot of censorship at the moment. We had several shows taken down, and we are very, very sad about that. We had the very great interview we did with Dr. Andrew Kaufman was taken down. So we have that on our BitChute channel and our Brighteon channel. I just want to let you guys know that you can find those shows there. Also, our interview with John Rappaport was taken down, as well as the show with Judy Mikovits, Dr. Judy Mikovits, our part 1 with her, and our part 2, where lots of your questions from the viewers are also included, will come on those channels soon as well, Brighteon and BitChute, and later on Brand New Tube. We also had a show with Claire Edwards, her presentation, What on Earth is Going On? The French Army Reserves officers report that she translated was also taken down. So of course we are very sad about that. I just wanted to tell you here while we are still on the live stream. So you can also support us on BitChute and Brighteon. But please support us here on YouTube. This is where we have all of you guys, and we love you very much. So thank you so much to Mark STOLK, and thanks to all of you for watching Age of Truth TV. You can support us by clicking onto our website, ageoftruth.tv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications. You can also sign up for our newsletter on our website, ageoftruth.tv. And on behalf of our team here, and of course Lauge, can you say hi to everybody?
Thank you so much for watching, guys. Very good stream.
We thank you so much for watching and for all of your support, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Have a wonderful night.